It was a chilly evening in December 2003 when Patricia Taylor, a soft-spoken woman in her late 60s, walked into an upscale French restaurant in New York City. Patricia wasn't someone who went out often. She preferred quiet dinners at home in Los Angeles. But this time she was visiting her son, Keanu Reeves, who had insisted she experience the city in style. So, she had dressed in a cozy wool coat and sensible shoes and decided to treat herself to a special dinner at a place she had read about in a travel guide. Patricia hoped they would be able to find her a table, even though she didn't have a reservation. She wasn't looking for special treatment. She simply wanted a warm meal and a new experience. But as soon as she stepped inside, the head waiter, Daniel, approached her with a sneer. "Ma'am," Daniel said loudly, looking her up and down with obvious disdain. "We have a dress code here. We don't serve casual diners." The word stung. Patricia always led a humble life, and she wasn't used to being treated this way. She glanced around at the other guests, men and women in elegant clothes, who seemed to be sizing her up. Their judgmental stares burned into her. I didn't realize," Patricia began, her voice trembling, but Daniel cut her off with a dismissive wave. "It's obvious, isn't it? This isn't a fast food place. Maybe try somewhere more appropriate for you." Patricia felt stunned. She had been around Hollywood's high society for years, working as a costume designer, but she had never been treated with such rudeness before. She swallowed her pride, took a small step back, and began to turn away, ready to leave. But before she could walk out, a younger waiter approached her cautiously. His name was Simon. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "Please don't leave. Let me check if we can accommodate you." Daniel scoffed. "Why bother? She clearly doesn't belong here." Unbeknownst to Daniel, Patricia's son was none other than Keanu Reeves, the famous Hollywood icon known for his kindness and humility. Patricia always made sure to keep her life private and never mentioned her connection to Keanu. But as she stood there, deciding whether to stay or walk out, she thought about what Keanu had told her just the night before. "Mom," he had said during their phone call, "you deserve to be treated like a queen no matter where you are. Remember that?" With a bit more courage, Patricia turned back to Daniel and said softly, "I'll wait for a table." "Thank you." What happened next would be talked about for weeks. Simon quickly rushed to prepare a table, and Daniel leaned toward another server, whispering something that made both of them laugh. Patricia overheard them say charity case, and her stomach churned. But she stayed rooted to the spot, refusing to let their cruelty defeat her. None of them noticed a man sitting quietly at the bar near the entrance. He had long hair tucked under a beanie, and he blended into the crowd, but his piercing gaze was fixed on the scene unfolding before him. The man stood up, his boots clicking on the polished floor as he approached Patricia. "Mom," he said, and Patricia's eyes widened in shock as she turned around. It was Keanu Reeves, her son, standing right in front of her. The room fell silent, and Daniel's smirk faltered. Keanu gently placed a protective arm around his mother, his kind eyes scanning her face to make sure she was okay. Patricia blinked back tears, trying to regain her composure, but the hurt from the humiliation still lingered in her expression. "Is this man bothering you?" Keanu asked softly, but his voice carried a quiet intensity that made Daniel shift uncomfortably. Patricia shook her head. "I'm fine, Keanu. I think maybe I don't belong here after all." But Keanu didn't look away. He turned his gaze toward Daniel, his jaw tightening. He wasn't the type to lash out or make a scene, but the blatant disrespect toward his mother cut deeper than any insult ever hurled at him. "She belongs wherever she wants to be," Keanu said, his tone measured but firm. Daniel's face turned red, realizing who stood before him. I didn't know. I mean, if I had known she was with someone important." "Important?" Keanu cut him off, his voice rising just enough to silence the murmurs around the room. "She's important because she's a person. A human being. That should have been enough." The room fell into an uncomfortable hush. Patricia, always gracious, leaned toward Simon, the young waiter who had tried to help her. "Thank you, young man. You didn't have to stand up for me, but it means the world that you did." Keanu, looking down at his mom, gently whispered, "It's not about special treatment, Mom. You taught me to treat everyone with kindness. I couldn't stand by and let someone disrespect you like that." Daniel, meanwhile, looked mortified, as though the weight of his actions had finally sunk in. But Keanu wasn't finished. He turned to Simon, the young waiter, and handed him a stack of crisp bills. "Take this for being the only decent person here tonight," he said. Simon's hands shook as he accepted the money, his face a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Daniel, still embarrassed, tried to stammer out an apology, but Keanu stopped him in his tracks. You don't need to make it up to us, Keanu said firmly. You need to think about why you treated her that way in the first place. With that, Keanu gently guided his mom toward the exit. Patricia sighed, her breath visible in the cold night air. Keanu, you didn't have to do all that. I wasn't expecting special treatment, she said softly. It's not about special treatment, Mom, Keanu said, looking down at her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. You taught me to treat everyone with kindness. I couldn't just stand by and let someone disrespect you like that. As they walked down the bustling street, Patricia leaned into her son, grateful for his steady presence by her side. She felt a warmth in her chest, but it wasn't just from the cool evening air, it was the comfort that came from having Keanu close to her. You know, she said quietly, I wasn't going to say anything, but the way that man looked at me, it reminded me of the struggles I had when you were young. Back then we didn't have much and people judged me for how I looked or where I came from. Keanu stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were serious, filled with a quiet resolve. Mom, those people didn't know your story. They didn't know how hard you worked to give us a good life. They didn't see the sacrifices you made so we could survive. Patricia's eyes began to well with tears. She had spent so many years working multiple jobs, sewing costumes late into the night, cleaning houses, selling homemade crafts at markets, doing everything she could to support Keanu and his siblings. She never complained, but the scars of those struggles sometimes resurfaced in moments like this. You never forget, do you? She whispered, brushing away a tear. Never, Keanu said firmly. And I'll never let anyone make you feel less than the incredible woman you are. They continued walking in silence for a while, the city lights shimmering around them. The bond between mother and son felt stronger than ever after that moment. But as they approached a nearby diner, Patricia paused, a small smile breaking through her sadness. Do you remember that little place we used to go to in Toronto? The one with the pancakes, she asked. Keanu grinned. Yeah. Best syrup I've ever had. Want to find something like that here? Patricia asked. She nodded. Let's find somewhere simple. Somewhere real. They disappeared into the glow of the city lights. Patricia felt a deep warmth in her chest. Despite how the evening had started, it ended with a reminder of the love and respect she had worked so hard to build in her son. They found a small diner tucked into a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't fancy, worn wooden booths, a counter with a glass case filled with pastries, and the smell of grilled cheese lingering in the air. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt warm and welcoming, exactly what Patricia needed after the events of the evening. A cheerful waitress with tired eyes greeted them warmly. Take any booth you like, sweetheart, she said, her voice full of kindness that felt like a balm to Patricia's bruised spirit. They slid into a booth by the window. Keanu quickly shrugged off his jacket and draped it over his mom's shoulders. You're shivering, he said softly. Patricia smiled weakly and pulled the jacket around her like a shield. Thank you, sweetheart. You're too good to me. Not possible, Mom. You deserve the world, Keanu said. As they waited for their food, Patricia's thoughts drifted back to the restaurant and the sting of the waiter's words. You know, she began hesitantly, looking at the worn menu, it wasn't just what he said, it was how he looked at me, like I didn't belong. I've worked so hard to move past those feelings, but tonight, it all came rushing back. Keanu's brow furrowed. Mom, I hate that you ever felt that way. People can be cruel, but their opinions don't define you. You've always been stronger than they'll ever know. Patricia's voice wavered as she replied, it's just, sometimes I still feel like that young, single mom struggling to make ends meet. Like I have to prove I'm worth something. Keanu reached across the table and took her hands in his. Mom, listen to me. You're worth everything. You gave up your dreams so I could chase mine. You worked late nights and early mornings. You believed in me when no one else did. If anyone dares to look down on you, it says more about them than it ever could about you. Tears filled Patricia's eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she let them fall, each one carrying years of buried pain. You always make me feel so seen, Keanu, she whispered. It's like you've never forgotten where we came from. I couldn't forget even if I tried, Keanu said, his eyes glistening now. Every role I've taken, every red carpet I've walked, every moment of my so-called success, I carry you with me. I wouldn't be here without you. The waitress returned with their food, pancakes for Patricia and a grilled cheese sandwich for Keanu. Here you go, darlings, she said with a warm smile. Hope this makes your night a little brighter. Patricia nodded, her voice too choked with emotion to respond. Keanu gave the waitress a grateful smile, then turned back to his mom. Do you remember how you used to sew costumes for me when I wanted to act out movie scenes in the living room? Patricia laughed softly. Of course I do. You always insisted on being the hero. You were the real hero, Keanu said seriously again. You made magic out of nothing. You made me believe in possibilities even when the world seemed stacked against us. Patricia's hand trembled as she picked up her fork. I didn't do anything extraordinary, Keanu. I just loved you. And that, Keanu said thickly, is the most extraordinary thing anyone's ever done for me. As they ate, their conversation drifted to happier memories. Snowy Christmases in Toronto, the first time Patricia saw one of Keanu's movies on the big screen, and the little traditions they had created over the years. By the time they left the diner, the weight of the evening had lifted, replaced by the quiet comfort of their unshakable bond. As they walked back to Patricia's hotel, Keanu wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You okay? He asked. Patricia looked up at him, her heart full despite the lingering ache. I'm more than okay, she said. Because I have you. Keanu smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I'll always have you, Mom. That night, as Patricia lay in bed, she thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the kindness of the young waiter, and the unwavering love of her son. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, for a life that, despite its hardships, had given her a son who truly understood what love meant. Somewhere in the city, Keanu sat by his window, gazing out at the stars, silently thanking the woman who had been his guiding light through every storm. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.